Welcome to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast.
Welcome back to A Fork in Time, everybody. This is Chris Coppola, and I'm joined today by Eric Rush. Do you want to say hello to the good people, Eric?
Hello to the good people, Chris.
This is a thing, Don. This is gonna be a thing. I
It
don't
is a
even
thing.
care.
Well,
Um,
and I don't even know, Chris. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point where we might as well just make this sort of our theme. I
That's
mean, I
our
think
intro. That's the intro.
all of the greats really had sort of either a sign-on phrase or a
Mhm,
sign-off phrase. You know, all the Late Show hosts did.
mhm.
Walter Cronkite did, and so I feel like we're very much in that league. So so we might
Okay.
as well.
All right.
Obviously, I'm being a little facetious, but
So, the one thing that Cronkite never did?
what's that?
A live stream episode.
He didn't do a live stream episode. Yeah, as it turns out, the technology wasn't there,
Yeah.
and wow, that was a really good tee up, Chris. I like that. So yeah, everybody who's listening might remember that on the last podcast, both of the podcasts, both Rumor It Happened in Fork in Time, the group had talked about the potential of having a live stream on YouTube. And I think we're really excited to do this. It's not going to be a traditional episode. We had talked about doing a traditional episode, but Chris was very upfront to say, guys, the editing of doing a video episode would be a lot. And Chris has a day job, and we understand that. And so instead of doing a live stream where it's a full episode, we do something that's a lot more free form. And what we're envisioning, and the team hasn't totally decided what this is going to look like, nor have we decided exactly when. But what we'd like to do is just a Q&A. And so any listeners who are interested can come on, can join us, can interact with the team. The team will be talking in a way that is a lot more free form than we usually do. As you know, that these episodes tend to be pretty informal anyway, but even behind the scenes is a little more informal, and kind of in the prep work, we have a lot of fun talking. So Chris and I have been talking for about a half hour before we started the podcast, and just talking about the things, some of it about the episode, but just talking about the things. And so we think it might be fun for anybody who's listening to sort of get to meet us in some sense, and understand who the people on the other end of the microphone are. So we're hopeful that this is something that will happen in the next few weeks to couple months. We'll see.
Mhm.
I don't know. Chris and we were like, well, we don't want to nail down too many schedules, because we don't know what Don and Alexis and Eric and Robert and anybody else who wants to join us, we don't know what they're doing that day. So we don't want to overpromise, but we want to make sure that people know that this is something we're actively working on and we're very excited about. So that's our plug. We'll continue plugging this every episode.
Yes. So for today, though, we do today's a traditional episode.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about this might just be a sequel to stuff you and I have already done, I think, on the
A little
NASA
bit.
episode.
A
Yeah.
little bit, because we did talk about the NASA stuff. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So do you want to go ahead and start setting it up?
Yeah, I'd love to. There's a couple of parallel threads here when I think about this, and everybody here knows that I'm a space travel enthusiast. I'm a NASA enthusiast. I have no particular training in this, and so I will probably make some mistakes in my description of this, and that's fine. And so if anybody who is an astronaut candidate, aerospace engineer, or just a person who knows more about this than I do, we welcome you writing in and talking about this. I am more than happy to correct myself on air if there's something I get wrong. But the way I look at this is we had a shuttle program in the early 2000s that was aging. The shuttle was, and I think everybody who's listened to the back catalog knows that I'm not that enthusiastic about the space shuttle program. I think it was pretty obsolete before it even started. It was sort of a school bus to space, and it had a lot of limitations. And so unsurprisingly, by the time we got to the early 2000s, we were at a point where it really wasn't meeting the needs that we had at that time, and so a decision was made to retire it. And this is a decision that was made in 2004. So President Bush had come up with a whole vision, and it was called Vision for Space Exploration. And one of the things that it called for was the retirement of the space shuttle once the ISS was complete. So ISS started to be constructed, and I'm going to say, I don't know, I'm going to say 1998 was when a lot of the kind of the main modules were included. I'm probably wrong about that. But point being, by 2004, there was still a lot to do. And there was some other missions that needed to occur for assembly. There were some missions that needed to happen for the Hubble to be serviced. And but then there was also problems that were just sort of logistical problems because of the issues that happened with Space Shuttle Columbia in 2003. So that was because we just didn't have orbiters that were available. So long story short, the last mission that happened with the space shuttles occurred in July of 2011. And at that point, there were no more space shuttles. And so, and it seems crazy to think about, but for 11 years, there has not been a U.S. governmental space program that will lead that actually can lead manned missions to space. We've had to do something else. And what is that? And the answer is, well, that depends. And because there has not been a space shuttle program, what there's been is a couple of different options. And we'll come back to what these options really mean, but one of them have been to partner with the Russian space agencies and to use the Soyuz capsules. And there's kind of been updated Soyuz capsules that have been used. So the Soyuz has been used for years and years, but they continue to update it. And so there's been new generations of Soyuz that have been around since, I don't know, 2010 or so. Again, I'm probably a little off on my dates, but that's probably about right. And so a lot of times this is what we've been using for manned space missions, and then we've been using the private sector in a lot of cases for cargo in particular. And this is where a lot of what we're talking about today will happen. So I think when we're looking at what that would look like, I think we have to say, who is or what is the company that is supplying a lot of the cargo for the ISS and for other other aspects of the space program in the ISS.
So what company do we decide to work with?
SpaceX.
And what is a little bit of the background there? Who's behind it? And does that create some funness for this process?
So SpaceX is a company that is owned by Elon Musk. And so he has always been interested in space travel. And so he looked to start a new space company in early 2002. And so he had some business partners. He had some people that were NASA alums that worked with him. And basically what he wanted to do is he said he wanted to decrease the cost and improve the reliability of access to space. And he's he's kind of a numbers guy. So he wanted to do so by a factor of 10. And so what he eventually did with SpaceX is they developed it's their first orbital launch vehicle, and this is a launch vehicle that was eventually known as the Falcon 1. So it was a small lift launch vehicle. It was kind of a test bed, and what Falcon 1 tried to do is it tried to sort of be a proof of concept. But the problem is that the first several launches of Falcon 1 were failures, and this was a real problem because it almost ended the company. And this is, keeping in mind that Elon Musk was not just the CEO of SpaceX, he was also the CEO of Tesla. And Tesla has been seen as sort of a success story as well these days, but Tesla had a rough go of it around this time, and they were almost failing as well. And so this is a CEO of several companies that were all pretty much bankrupt at the same time. And so there's a final attempt in September of 2008 where they attempted a launch of Falcon 1, and it was a success. And then subsequently they were awarded what's called the CRS, or Commercial Supply Services contract, by NASA. and you have a government contract that's really helpful to your bottom line. And they also received some external funding from an entrepreneur in Oklahoma by the name of T. Boone Pickens. And so anybody who's an Oklahoma State fan knows who T. Boone Pickens is. And so they were able to kind of cobble together the enough funding to, to number one, have a second successful and fifth total launch that next year, but then also to focus the resources development of a different orbital rocket called the Falcon 9. The Falcon 9 was a medium lift rocket, which is a little more sustainable at that point. And so eventually over the course of this is kind of 2010, 2012, they were able to demonstrate that the success of the Falcon 9, and that they were able to manufacture a number of these. And there's another there's another kind of Dragon spacecraft that was involved in there as well. So Dragon spacecraft, it's not a rocket. It's
It's the thing that goes on top of the rocket.
Yeah,
it's what actually delivers it.
It's the capsule. Yeah,
Okay.
is the way I would put it. So, so anyway, that's that's kind of the history of the Falcon 9. And then they eventually will what they did is they experimented with capabilities with that, and they also explored capabilities of reusability, and also things like what we call VTOL, or vertical takeoff and landings, which can make a little more versatility in sorts of where you can do the launch and how you can do the launch. And so there was some excitement there, and over the course of the 20 teens, there were some commercial launches and some commercial success. And they were able to capitalize on, and they were able to sort of bend the curve a little bit with the cost of doing payloads for things like the U.S. military, or places like that. So you were able to do a little bit more. So SpaceX really did give some versatility there. And so what they continue to do is they continue to increase both the size and capability of the orbital vehicles that were involved. And this has included kind of the penultimate, and we'll get back to this in here in a little bit, which is what we call the Starship. And the Starship is it is a really massive orbital vehicle. It's what I would call a super heavy launch vehicle. And anybody who's been on podcast before has heard me kind of admire the Saturn V. And I think for good reason, and not only just because of its capabilities, but because of when those capabilities were realized. I mean, keep in mind the Saturn V is a product of the 1960s, and until fairly recently, it still had the largest cargo capability of any of the rockets that had ever been developed. Now, Starship does exceed the Saturn V slightly in both capacity and in size, but it's made with 2010s 2020 technology. And so where we're at now is we're getting to the point where we're starting to develop and test and ultimately use the spaceship rocket. So this is an exciting time for anybody who's a space enthusiast, and anybody who's interested in the U.S. having a little more presence in space. So that's hopefully that's a little helpful background, Chris.
Yeah. So for the fourth Falcon 4 launch is kind of our point of divergence here.
I would think so. So again, we've got a really dire situation. I mean, you've got two companies that Elon Musk has that are both at this point, almost bankrupt. He's there's if you can look this up. He says he was down to his last $30 million, and let me tell you, I'd love to be down to my last $30 million someday. But for him, because of his the burn rate of his companies, that's a big deal. He is in dire straits with Tesla.
Space pun. I enjoy the space pun. I enjoy the burn rate space pun.
Yeah, burn rate. Yeah, in more ways than one. So he's down to a relatively small amount of money. He doesn't have a lot of investors. Financing has failed at that point for both SpaceX and Tesla, and presumably for other companies as well. I don't follow those other companies. I mean, he has a solar panel company that's now been folded into Tesla, but it was sort of separate at that point. and so he's in kind of bad shape, and he'll even, there, you can look at interviews of
Mhm.
him saying basically like, he was under tremendous amount of stress. He couldn't sleep during this time. This is a rough time in his life, and it's also in the context of a financial crisis that was occurring, and maybe put a pin in that. But it's in the context of a financial crisis. But
He was not alone up at 3 a.m. Can we say that pretty comfortably
I think you
during
can say
this
that.
time frame?
I think we can say that very comfortably, Chris, that he was definitely not alone. And so you have, this whole context here, and a lot was being put on this fourth launch of the Falcon 1. And in this fourth launch of the Falcon 1, which was by no means a in an automatic success. In fact, if you want to look at the track record from the first three vehicles, you would have to say it's most likely this was going to fail too. But it didn't. The fourth flight didn't fail. It succeeded. Having said that, there was it wasn't a total success, because you had a total rocket implosion, when kind of depressuration exceeded what was expected from the kind of the C-17 that was chartered to deliver the rocket, and they had to repair it. And so they had to repair it on the fly, which is not a great start to anything. But what happened is the Falcon 1 successfully flew in September. It delivered a very small cargo to low Earth orbit, and so hey, that's a success. It worked.
Mhm.
And so what would have happened if it wouldn't have worked? And we know for a fact that this, that the rocket had some issues. So what would have happened? It would have been very easy to have an alternate history where this rocket implosion that occurred, in that C-17, where it was catastrophic. Either it's catastrophic, and they looked at this and said, well, this rocket's not going to fly, we can't fix it, or if they would have tried to fix it and would have blown up on the launch pad, which that absolutely could have
Mhm.
happened. In fact, it seems like that was probably the more likely outcome of this, is that you would have a catastrophic failure, considering all of the issues that were involved. But it didn't. It worked, and it was just enough. It was
And
just enough for
and it
them to succeed.
also got them through this time frame until they can win that. I'm going to call it the freight contract
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for
We'll call it
NASA,
the freight contract.
just because this is that's what this is. This is not so much the school bus.
Yeah.
This is could we call it the UPS truck?
Yeah, sure. UPS or FedEx. I think that's probably a little bit
UPS.
better. And I think if
UPS.
you're looking for funding in 2008, I think you might be feel a little more secure with a government contract, in all honesty, than you would with a commercial one,
Mhm.
with a private sector one, because this was not a good time. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
2008. This time of 2008 was a bit of a scary time. Yeah, I think
It,
Chris and I both remember it well.
I do. I do. This, the other aspect of this is, imagine you're trying to get funding
Yeah,
for a failed company that's never successfully launched anything. I did just look this up. Tesla turned a profit last year. That was their first profitable year.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Ever since, literally for the past 12 years of its existence, at least since this point, it's been losing money. So,
Yep.
with everything else going on, with all of the other bailouts happening at this point, maybe it just becomes politically untenable for the United States government to give Elon Musk, because that's who this. I'm sure there are shareholders, I'm sure there are investors, but that's the optics of this. And we just got done giving Wall Street a couple $1 billion. There's probably not much of an appetite to give this contract to somebody else who's complaining about their dire straits because they're down to their last $30 million.
Yeah,
Um,
probably not. I mean, I think you're looking at a very different SpaceX than would exist today.
and also, just to put another thing out there, as you said, between the end of the shuttle missions and the beginning of the SpaceX freight contract, there was an existing solution that
There,
had been working and that had not had depressurization issues, that had not been blowing up on the launch pad, right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, not a perfect solution, but a solution that it had, we'll just say, far more successes than failures. We can definitely say that.
I'm not willing to say that. I know the history of that program, and I just more recently, I'd agree with you. There weren't very many high profiles, but there were probably issues.
Oh, there were definitely issues. And I don't, and for anybody who is not aware what we're talking about, Soyuz.
Mhm.
And so this has been the Soviet and later Russian spacecraft that has been, it's been modified over the years, but in its heart, it's been in service for since the 1960s. And so this is a crewed module, and crude meaning
Mhm.
there's people on board, not that it is this. Well, actually, you could say it's
Yeah, it
crude
is.
in both ways. I mean, I think it's crude, and then it's also crude.
Uh, uh,
It is not fancy.
I mean, literally, this was built around the time. This was probably the generation after Saturn V when they started sending Mir, right? Would that kind of be
So
appropriate?
yeah, I mean, I guess I would say you probably, there was an original Soyuz module in 1963, but
Mhm.
I think about the first generation of the Soyuz spacecraft as being between about 1967 and 1970. So they're pretty early.
Mhm.
And then there's been multiple generations since that time, and the module that we have now is called the Soyuz MS, and that's been around for about the last probably about the last 6 years, and
Okay.
they're different. I mean, they've been, they've definitely modified the Soyuz module over the past 50 odd years, but
One would hope.
it's recognizably the same though.
Mhm.
I mean, like it's Soyuz, it has a very simple design. It has sort of it's like three parts. So one is a kind of an orbital module, one is a reentry module, and then one is a service module, and they're kind of linked all
Mhm.
together. And so this is and and the reentry and the orbital module are habitable. So there's just there's not a lot.
Mhm.
I would say the Soyuz craft is bigger than an Apollo command module,
Mhm.
but that's about all I'll say for it, is that it's bigger than Apollo. But there are many reasons why we retired Apollo in the early 70s. One is there just wasn't as much appetite for lunar exploration. We've talked about that
Mhm.
before, but then also it's just it was becoming obsolete. So you can fit three people in a Soyuz, and that's kind of what you got. And it is a relatively simple spacecraft.
Okay. So that's in our scenario, that's the option that the United States government decides to go with, primarily because it's a pay as we go at this point. We're not, signing a $1 million contract when, again, the economy is collapsing. This is not exactly a time when space exploration or anything like that is really going to be able to draw a lot of public funding. Is that safe to say?
I would say it's probably true. I mean, I haven't perceived a really big appetite for for government funding for the space
Mhm.
program for many years. Um, I don't know. There just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest. So which is very disappointing to me. As anybody who's listened to the podcast knows, I'm very pro, man.
Mhm.
I should say person to space, the space mission, not man. I am very pro person to space missions. I think human exploration has a big purpose.
As somebody who bought their current residence in 2010, I feel like there were other things we could have been spending that money on.
Probably, but I'm also, and this is kind of goes back to the episode we did on the
Mhm.
Human Genome Project, is I look at things in terms of return on investment. And the Human Genome Project return on investment has been $171 for every dollar invested.
Mhm.
That's great. The space program, not quite that, but it's better than 1-to-1, I will guarantee you. So I mean, I
Okay.
think if you look at these programs, these sort of, we'll call them moonshot programs, even though they're not all moonshot programs. But I think if you look at these sort of more expansive, explorative programs, they pay off.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to wait for it, but they pay off.
So, in our scenario right
Yeah,
now, we've gone with the Russian solution, the Soyuz solution for regular maintenance, sending stuff up to the International Space Station. What do you think happens to? I think everybody right now is thinking about Blue Origin, is thinking about all of the space tourism. We haven't used the name Virgin Galactic yet, but it's in that milieu.
hmm
What happens to private space?
yeah. I think that there's always going to be some interest there. I do wonder, in the absence of something like a SpaceX, does it still maintain a little bit of a niche status? Blue Origin was actually founded before SpaceX, by a couple of years. And so in even though it was again founded by a different billionaire.
That's exactly why I decided to call SpaceX a UPS truck rather than an Amazon delivery truck.
Yeah,
So you think there is going to be kind of there's always going to be rich people who want to escape Earth.
sure.
There's going to be, like you were saying a little bit, space dilettantes. There's going to be tourism there, but
Right.
maybe not the full commercial industrial applications that we're seeing with SpaceX today.
Right. And I think that's very likely, as they wouldn't be seeing quite quite that level of infrastructure. And I mean, I even think with the pressure of SpaceX there, I think Blue Origin is quite a bit behind
Mhm.
where SpaceX is now. I mean, they sent their first crewed mission into space a year ago.
Mhm.
Um,
And this is something we talked a little bit about. What do you mean by space? Because I found just the numbers on that pretty interesting.
well, I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends a little bit on who you ask. But if you want to look at what sort of the kind of the edge of space is, I think most people would say, and I don't know, I think it's, if I remember right, it's called the Kármán line.
Mhm.
And people will generally call this 100 kilometers, or about 61 miles above the Earth's mean sea level. So that's kind
Okay.
of the edge of space. And if you look at where Blue Origin is with its flight, it's barely over that. The last all the launches that have happened with their kind of more recent modules that have been either crewed or uncrewed, they've been a little over that. They've been about 105 to 110 kilometers
Okay.
above the mean sea level. So it's just barely above that edge of space. And so you ask, like, where does the ISS then lie? So if the ISS, or if the edge of space is about 100 kilometers, or 61 miles, and Blue Origin's getting about 110, or call it 68 miles or something like that, then the ISS is about, it's at its apogee. And again, we're talking about apogee here.
What is
Um,
apogee?
so it's kind of it's the furthest away from
Okay.
the Earth, as opposed to perigee, which is the closest. Again,
So it's
I'm
not that software company that all of
no, no,
us of
no.
our age downloaded games
And
from.
again, if there's anybody who is specifically trained in
Mm.
in space flight, orbital mechanics, aerospace engineering, they're probably cringing at my descriptions. But the way I understand them as a non-astronaut or non-aerospace engineer is the apogee is the furthest away in orbit from Earth,
Mhm.
and perigee is the closest. And all orbits are effectively elliptical.
Mhm.
And so your apogee and your perigee are not identical. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of difference if you're in stable orbit. These are not stable orbit, as I recall. These are suborbital space
Okay.
flights. And so it's kind of, you come up, you come down. I mean, these are sort of, I consider these as
These
sort of
are,
like
but aren't. What's the ISS's orbit above Earth?
it's absolutely orbital, and it also has an elliptical orbit,
Mm,
but as I recall, the apogee and perigee are not very much different. I want to say the perigee is about 250 miles
okay.
and the apogee is about 260 miles. And so, it's one of those orbits that is technically elliptical, but if you just would look at it, it seems like pretty circular.
So I'm hearing that basically the best Blue Origin can do is getting you 1/3 of the way to ISS.
1/3 at best. Yeah, 1/3 at best to get you there. Maybe,
Okay.
and so you're a long ways away to be able to do that with Blue Origin. So you want to set things up for us, Chris?
Yeah. I want to. Well, are we going to jump to like, hey, why it's good that we came up with this episode this
Yeah,
week as opposed to
let's do that.
um.
Let's go straight into it.
Yeah, there's a little place called Ukraine, and there's a war going on there. And literally this week, I don't know if we had talked about this episode earlier, but it's really interesting that it's coming out right now. Because as we speak, the Russian Space Agency has decided that they will no longer participate in the International Space Station project, which, frankly, it's not the end of the project. It's not that big a deal because we have SpaceX that can, like, as we said, next day delivery.
Yep.
If in our scenario we don't have that and we decided to depend upon the Russian Soyuz capsules, what does that do to us?
Well, it makes us very dependent on the Russian Space Agency.
The question, first is that enough leverage to strong arm any kind of position that the United States is exercising right now?
I mean, we don't know for sure, but I would say no.
With
I don't think
Mhm.
that I don't think they would, because we're looking at this from the standpoint of a handful of astronauts, and I don't and I don't you never want to play games with people's lives or feel like any individual life is not worthwhile, because they certainly are, um but if you look at this, we've got so if we there are currently 3 American
Mhm.
astronauts and 1 Italian astronaut.
Okay.
If and this is again, if anybody has better information on this, please do let me know.
The
But
first thing I'm thinking about is those people are up there now
yeah,
under a situation where we know we can get them back. Do you think
yeah,
Russia times this to play games with that?
I think Russia times everything to play games with us.
So they do this the day after they just sent somebody up there
Yeah. Well,
and make
maybe, I don't know. I don't know.
okay. Again, like this seems like a natural leverage point, and they
Yeah,
televise these people up there.
yeah. Yep.
Um,
And so I am confirming that the current crew of the ISS consists of 3 Russian cosmonauts,
okay.
3 American astronauts, and 1 Italian. And I don't know if Italians use the term, or if the ESA uses the term astronaut, but as an American, I am going to use the term the term
There's an Italian
astronaut.
citizen up there.
There is an Italian citizen up there. Yeah, yeah. There is a Yeah, there is definitely an Italian citizen up there at the moment, and has been up there for the past few months.
Okay.
And this is and these are, I mean, let's be honest, like the people that make it up to the ISS, these are the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are truly, amazing humans that are up there. The Italian citizen who is up there currently is an astronaut and engineer, and she speaks 6 languages. So yeah, these people are the best of us.
Okay. Um, so that could really complicate our current situation if we don't have this backup.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything else that kind of pops to mind about what could be different if we do not have a this infusion of private cash or of public money into space exploration?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. I mean, I think there's a possibility it could go a different way. The money could have gone to a different company, and there always is the possibility. There is always the possibility that this could be there could have been renewed interest in a public option.
Okay.
Um,
Basically another NASA program.
yeah, a different NASA
Okay.
probe. I mean, I think necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so the Space Index made it so it wasn't necessarily always possible for us to do.
Hmm.
Um, but I think now we kind of have to, at this point. And so maybe there is a little bit more of of an impetus for us to create something that is that is a kind of a government, a government driven. Um,
So
y-
are you saying that this would be we're starting this process now, almost like those stranded astronauts or another Sputnik moment, or would this have happened earlier, kind of a sense that America, the United States government needs its own solution to do this?
well, I mean, I think you would certainly like to have that capability, and maybe if there was a need for that, there would be more interest in that. Because I think that there has definitely been interest in kind of the popular culture about Space Index and Elon Musk in particular.
Hmm.
And so if that's not there, then something is going to take the place of that. Now, whether it's one of the other commercial companies or whether it's renewed interest in a NASA derived project, I don't think we know that. But something would probably come in to fill the vacuum in some way. Now, maybe it's a new reality TV star and it has nothing to do with space. I fear that would be the case. I hope it's not, but I fear that would be the case. But I think that there might be some renewed interest. But even if there wasn't, we've got people that are up there, that are up there right now, that could potentially be stranded if you have a recalcitrant Russian space agency that says, we're done. We are not interested in supporting the ISS. We're pulling out. Maybe we're pulling out now.
Hmm.
And so we have Dr. Watkins, Dr. Lindgren, Colonel Hines are up there right now. And would we let them be stranded up there? I don't think we would. Would that mean that we would do, we would have, something we would capitulate to the Russians to do that? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think this would be a case for, good old American ingenuity. How do we get them? How do we get them home?
Yeah.
We've done it
Okay.
before.
Yeah. Yeah, we have. Anything else pop to mind about this scenario?
Well, not at the moment. What do you think, Chris?
Not really. I think we've really covered it well. For those of you at home, I'm working on sharing an image. This will probably be the image for this episode, and you're about to hear Eric laugh.
Oh no.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It absolutely is.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Oh,
Yeah.
is there a video, or are you just showing me?
Oh no, no, this is just the
Oh
image. You
yeah.
know exactly.
Yeah, so you only live twice.
Yeah,
So I
because
don't know if anybody else are James Bond fans. I don't know. The most current crop are actually pretty good movies, but there's been some real turkeys in the James Bond universe, and yeah.
but also just it's great. It's space related. It is let's go and rescue some people, and it's also very much playing off the idea that Elon Musk might be a Bond villain. It really does
He
work
very
out.
well. At least you didn't do Moonraker, Chris.
No, no, there's standards.
We have our standards on A Fork in Time, and they
Yes.
include no Moonraker. Yeah, no On Her Majesty's Secret Service. No,
No,
we don't do that.
not you know what? Yeah, not really a lot of
Timothy Dalton.
yeah, none of those. Just none.
No, Timothy Dalton, and then you had
Never Say Never Again.
Never Say Never Again. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is alternate history, not movie reviews.
We can do. I mean, maybe we'll branch out. Maybe it'll be a Fork in Time, a Rumor It Happened, and then
a theater where it happened,
and then Bond villains.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we could. We've got all the time in the world, Chris. We don't have anything else to do. We don't have day jobs.
No, we don't. We're also not sitting right here looking at a clock.
We're also not looking at the clock. Well, and I'm even Central Time and Chris is Eastern Time, so it's getting pretty late for him.
Yes.
So,
but
all right. Well, I think that's a wrap, Chris.
Great. For all of those of you that have stuck around this long, if someone should come across a fork in the road, what do you think they should do, Eric?
I think they should take it.
Great. Look forward to talking to you guys soon again on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. Learn more and provide feedback by visiting our website at www.aforkintimepodcast.com. Connect to us on Facebook at facebook.com/aforkintime or follow us on Twitter at AFIT Podcast. If you want to support the show financially, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/aforkintime. We hope you will join us next time.